Hey everyone, Shiny Key with Crevian here. Today we're going to be looking at doing the front end for our menu system. This will go in tandem with the backend videos that we made, setting up the backend login and stuff. We're going to be looking at logging in and signing up. So, to do that, I'm using Cognito. I do have some videos going over kind of the back-end setup of how you would do this, setting up API gateway and setting up Cognito in AWS. I'm using the blueprints for Cognito by Multiplayscape, shown here. That's the nodes we're going to be using. It exposes the Cognito, or rather, it exposes the AWS SDK specifically for Cognito to Blueprint. So makes it a little bit easier to work with. Makes it so you don't have to make your own nodes. Saves a bunch of time when we are doing this. There's a couple things that need to be set up, but it's fairly straightforward, and we'll walk through all of them. I'll show you how the widgets were created. I'm not going to do a live coding of the widgets in this video, just because it's very project specific of how you are going to want to design your widgets for your game. But I will show you how everything works. So I'm using the ultimate menu system for this, and a lot of the stuff you're going to see is tying into that ultimate menu system. So this will kind of be a little bit of a double. We'll be showing how to set up Cognito, but it'll also show you how to kind of work with ultimate menu system and how to kind of integrate new menus and new flows and logic into that system. So, without further ado, let's actually start with the game instance. Now, the game instance is where I decided to hold a lot of this logic. The game instance is persistent. It is your game's instance. So it's not going to go away between level transitions. It's persistent throughout the entire game's life cycle. So it makes a lot of sense to keep stuff here that we want to have alive for the entire game, but doesn't need to have any kind of server-side thing. With authentication, that's obviously where a good candidate for where we want our authentication, and that is also where Ultimate Menu System keeps a lot of their calls for the same reason, so we can have a consistent menu system throughout the game. So, let's get started here. The first thing that we're going to look at is actually not this one. We're going to come over to event init. This is kind of the first important thing here, all right? So event init is when the game instance inits. Now, the menu initialization, if you looked at or followed the Ultimate Menu System tutorials that I have up, this is the initialization for the actual menu. This stuff right here is what is new. We need to start by initializing the Cognito, what's called the IDP object. I believe it's the IDP. Might be LDP. I can never tell if that's an I or an L. It's probably an L. It's probably the LDP object. But we need to initialize the client LDP object first. This is the object, as we'll see in a little bit. This is the object that we're actually going to be making all of our calls off of. Now, you have to plug these in. They are blank though, so let me open these and I'll show you these. So my Cognito credentials, I do not set these for access key, secret access key, session token, expiration, yada yada. I do not set those. If you watched my backend video going over kind of how to set up Cognito, I explain a little bit more in depth why I don't set these. Long story short, I won't rehash that video, but long story short, you really want to stay away from access keys and secret access keys, and you want to use a different method, which is the client secret here. So this does need to be plugged in here. You will get an error, but you can just do what I did. Pull off of the credentials, promote to variable, don't set anything. Your other one comes with a lot of defaults. Again, if you pull off and make Blueprint, your other one comes with a lot of defaults. You can pretty much leave these things alone. The only thing that I would point your attention to is your region right here. Your region needs to be the same as whatever you have in AWS. So if you made your Cognito region in US West 1, you need to set your region right here. Other than that, everything else of this can remain pretty much default. Feel free to play with it if you have a specific configuration. This is specifically how Cognito is going to be talking to AWS. It is all the settings for whether we're doing SSL, if we're doing security keys, if we're doing proxies. I'm not doing any of that at this point in time. I'm keeping everything default, including actually US East 1. US East 1 is actually default for the plugin, and that just happens to be where I have my Cognito instance. So make sure that you have that as well. Okay? And then we're setting this as a variable as well. We're just keeping the variable with it. Now, one of the things that I probably should go over while we're here before we get too far into this, I actually have an interface set up for this. So we open this up. I have a couple interface functions here. So, and I'll go through these as well. So if you remember with interfaces are a way for us to interface with another blueprint without having to cast. Now, because it's the game instance, there is an argument here that you could just cast to your game instance. It's not going to be the end of the world here. I just chose to use an interface for this, which you'll see when we actually get into the actual blueprints a little bit here. But I have a couple of functions here. So my first function that I've set up here, it's all in this Cognito. It's just these few functions right here. The first one is the get Cognito identity provider client. And then we have the Cognito secret hash. We have, and actually let me go a little bit slower here so I can actually show you. So this one is going to be of type Cognito LDP client object. Then we're going to go through this one. The secret hash is just going to be a string. It's going to be a client ID, and it's going to be a return of secret hash. So 2 strings, actually 3 strings. It needs to take in a username, and then it needs to return the client ID and the secret hash. We're going to get into a little bit how these are implemented in a minute. I just want to show you if you wanted to go the interface route like I did. I just wanted to show you kind of what we're looking at here. Next, we have a call set authenticated. This is really going to be kind of dependent upon what values you do or do not want here. So I have authentication, which is of type authentication result type. This is a variable that you'll gain access to once you have the Cognito plugin installed. Then we have the display menu content, a true or false variable for me, the menu type, and the animation type. So I've customized it so when we finish the login, this set authenticated method gets called. I've chosen to give myself the flexibility to be able to call and open whatever menu I want next to open when authentication has happened. And then finally, we just have a get authentication, which is just this authentication result type. All right? So let's go back into the game instance and let's take a peek at how these are actually implemented. So as I said, we're first initializing everything over here, okay? If I come over to my interfaces and I come to AWS and Cognito, let's start with this get authentication. So get authentication is just going to return the authentication variable. This is a variable you're going to want to create. It is going to be of type authentication result type. And this holds your, as you can see, access token, expires, token type, refresh token, and ID token. Technically, I really should make this private because this should not be getting set by you. This is completely set by Cognito based on what user is logged in. We do have a sign out method as well. I'll show you that in a minute. If I come over here to my set authenticated method, we're setting the authentication. We're checking if we're going to display menu content. And then we're calling, this is a UMS function right here. We're calling the display menu content, basically what menu we want to load. Excuse me. What menu we want to load after we have authenticated. I actually haven't finished this yet, but this is my save, whether you want to save login, and it's just saving it to a save game instance. That way you don't, the players at the login every time, they can see if they can pull up a login from their save game. All right. Now, secret hash. Secret hash is kind of the bread and butter where you're going to get. I'm not going to show you these two variables because these are set up for me right now, but you will want two additional variables, both of them strings, one of them called client secret and one of them called client ID. Now, your client secret, if you remember in the Cognito video, that is your app client secret that you set up in Cognito's side. Your client ID is your pool ID of your Cognito pool. So this is telling Cognito how to find your pool. Now, this is where, in my opinion, this is better to do than access tokens or secret access tokens. What the secret hash is doing is it's taking the client secret, it's taking the client ID, and it's taking the username. So the username is going to be whatever your player types in on the front end. It's combining all of those, and it's using this secret hash node. And you can get that by just doing compute secret hash. Okay. And then it will return, you're gonna return the client ID and the secret hash. The secret hash is a specific token to that player that allows them to talk to the Cognito backend for authentication purposes. So, and that's the key point of why it is better. Okay, it is specific to the player. So the player is the one that is initiating this handshake to the backend to get their authentication details, rather than you hard coding security credentials to your backend that can potentially get leaked. All right. So that's the secret hash. This one's pretty easy. This one is just returning that variable. We go back to event graph. We go right here. It's just returning this variable right here. Like I said, you don't have to use an interface for this. You could just cast and grab these variables automatically. But a lot of this is just pulling off, storing the variable, and then using getter methods basically to get those values. And then, like I said, the only ones that are not like that are these two right here, where you have to create two string variables of client secret and client ID, and then put your client secret in there and your client ID in there. And that is going to be specific to your Cognito pool. All right. Now, we do also have a sign out method here as well. I'll show you a little tour of that as well. The sign out is just clearing out the user's sign out message, or the user's authentication session. And then in my case, it's taking them back to the login menu. So before we get into the actual menus, let's look at how we would prevent the menu, at least as it pertains to Ultimate Menu System, how we would prevent the menu from logging in. So if you have Ultimate Menu System and you followed my tutorial of getting all Ultimate Menu set up, the way Ultimate Menu System works is there's the begin play screen. That's where you have your partners, that little text that shows up, and then it pops up saying, your game name or Ultimate Menu System, whatever it is. That is all being called by this node right here. We touched on this node when we were setting this up, but this is kind of the magic that is happening with this system. So let's pop in here real quick. So get menu content or on menu content requested. This is what all the menus use and should use to display a new type of menu. So the default flow is coming in here. You start on begin play, right? And you come through here, and main menu, if you need your first init, you go through here, and this is your begin play screen right here. Now, I have a few differences, because you'll notice if we come over here to main menu right here, and we come down to main menu, and it's false, I have this check authentication. So this is how I'm preventing you from accessing the menu unless you're authenticated. Now, before we get into that, to get this actually working, you are going to want to add, as you see, I have a new menu here called login. So this requested menu type, this is an enum of menu handler type. So what you would have to do is come into it, and I actually don't remember where I stored it, so I'm just going to search it. I'm going to search menu handler type enum. This one right here, we would need to open that up. And by default, you're just going to have these top ones right here. You just need to add another enum and type it login or authentication. I honestly should probably call this authentication. I'm not going to change it now, but probably want to call it authentication. So that will allow you to have this extra pin right here to have login. Now, login for me, if I come and follow this logic down, is pretty much copied from the other menus. You can just copy and paste what you have up here and paste down here, okay? And this is just opening up my login widget and setting up the input modes. And we'll get into the widgets in a little bit here. But that is what this is doing. It is basically just calling the login widget. So let's take a look at this mysterious check authentication function before we actually kind of look into the widgets. By the way, if you are following along with this, you can do this in the order that I'm showing this in. So you can set this all up on the game instance level, get all this set up first, test it, make sure it's working, see like, are you actually like able to go to the menu or is it stopping you? And then move on. So let's open up this check authentication. The check authentication is a macro. It is a latent macro, which you'll see why it is a latent macro in a moment here. So we're going to do this. We're going to open up this check authentication macro. Now, this one is kind of dependent upon how you are doing this and whether or not you are using a saved game instance. Okay. So what we're first doing is we're grabbing this authentication string, or this authentication variable, sorry, and we're checking a few things. Basically, we're pulling this apart and we're checking if any of these fields are empty. We want to make sure that all this is not empty. Because if it's empty, like it is right now, and when we boot up the game, if it's still empty, that means we're not authenticated. So we need to pull the ripcord and bail. So if it is empty, we actually just skip all this logic and we go over here, which we'll get there in a little bit. But if it's not empty, we have authentication. So if it is empty, however, we want to attempt to recover. At least I do a little bit. So the first thing that I'm going to try is I'm going to try to load save authentication, which is a function that just loads. I'll open this up just so you can see it. It just loads the authentication or attempts to load the authentication from a saved game slot. I won't touch on this too much as there's a lot of stuff on how to kind of do save games. I might do a video on it, but it's fairly straightforward. All it's doing is it's saving this authentication variable to a save game, as you can see here. So I have this thing called save game, this save game node. All it is saving this variable to it. And then the load function, all it's doing is loading that variable again. So that's what we try to do. We're going to try, and of course it didn't close it out. We're going to try to load the saved authentication. All right. And if we cannot load the saved authentication, we're immediately going to call this node display menu content, and the menu type is going to be login. So that will take us to our login. It'll take us to our login screen in the menu type that we showed just a moment ago. And then I have these event dispatchers that call authentication is invalid. Just if I have anything listening for that, just letting everyone know, like the other classes that might be listening. I don't really have a specific example for this yet, but it's just in case I wanted to have a menu watch for it or something. But anyways, we're going to move on. I'm actually not sure why this is here. That must have been something I was testing. We're going to delete that. Okay, so if we could load the save authentication from our save game, we're going to set that authentication. We're going to keep moving on. We're going to grab our authentication. We're going to grab the access token. And we're going to check just real quick, is access token empty, because that's kind of the more important one. Technically, you should, and I actually probably will go back and do this. This should be almost identical to this. You'll see it a little bit, but we actually use the ID token to talk to Cognito. We don't use the access token. This still works because if any of these fields are empty, something's not set right. So it's kind of a mute point, but if you wanted it to be like 100% correct, technically you should be checking that you have an ID token, not an access token. But anyways, so if it is not empty, great. If it is empty, we bail out again and we say we failed, we need to go to the login screen. However, if we did find it, we're going to go to our final check. And this is where the latent part comes in. Okay? Because up until now, we've checked if we have a value in authentication, which is great, but we haven't actually checked, can we use that value yet? And that's where this comes in. So we're going to use, I guess we do use the access token. My mistake. We're going to check now, can we actually use this? Like, just because we have a value in there doesn't mean that it's actually useful. It doesn't mean that we're authenticated or we can talk to the backend. So we're going to go and we're going to take our access token. We're going to get our Cognito identity provider client, and we're going to call a get user function off of that. And you'll do that by, if you have your Cognito identity provider client, you'll just drag off of here and you'll type get user. Just like that. And it's that one right there. And we're going to attempt to get the user. All right. On a success, so if get user was successful, we're going to finally call authentication valid, and we're going to exit with authenticated. If it was not successful, I'm going to print the error message to the debug log. I'm going to completely clear out the authentication variable. I'm going to display the menu content of the login, and then this is kind of the last straw, if you will. This is the last time we attempted to check for authentication, and we couldn't. We got lots of chances, but at this point, we just don't have authentication in place. I know that was a little fast. I'm sorry, that was too fast. Slow it down if you do need to. But this is essentially going through all the steps of checking whether or not we have authentication, and then also making it valid. I was not able to find like a validation node. There is in the SDK, there is a way to check if your access token is valid on the backend. It's possible I'm blind. I could not find something like that. So I just used get user, because if you can get your own user, then you're obviously authenticated to Cognito. If you can't get your own user, you're not authenticated, right? So that is everything for the game instance. And if I forget something when we go through these logins and signups, we'll go through that. So without further ado, let's go through, let's actually call in all this stuff. So this is kind of the stuff that we've talked to and walked through so far. This is all showing you how to prevent your menu from actually logging in. But how do I actually log in? So let's go over to our first window here. So I have a simple, two simple widgets right here. Like I said, I'm not going to go over the widget design as it's really straightforward. I'm just using the text boxes from Ultimate Menu System. It's two text boxes, a forgot password button, which doesn't actually do anything for me yet. That's still kind of in a future thing for me. It's a pending thing. And then we have a login button, we have a sign up button. Okay. And then same thing for the sign up widget. Sign up widget is a username, an email, password, confirm password, sign up, and a back. Okay. So you'll want to design kind of your widgets how you want. Like I said, it's very, very game specific. So I don't really want to walk through it too much, especially since these are very, very basic widgets. But I do want to walk through the code with you. So if I come into the graph here, so the first thing we want to do, and we'll talk about this here in a minute here about the camera positions, but we're going to update our camera position first. Actually, let's talk about it now. So in Ultimate Menu System, you have camera positions. camera positions are a way for you to tell the system where you want your camera to be looking. So if I come over to my main menu over here, I have a couple of these set up, if I could find them. I think they're actually in the sky over here. Let me just come to Outliner. Here we go. So you have these BP camera focus targets. Let me open my details panel. So this is specifically the one for login. When you have these set up and you set the tag here, this is where the camera is going to go when this particular menu is loaded. Now, a note on this, your camera will be off of this big red arrow right here. So you can see this is slightly tilted. So your spring arm is going to follow this arrow line. So with the arrow being like this, you're going to be looking like this. You're going to be back here and looking down like this. So that will be wherever you want to position it. And it will lock to however you have this. So if I go back into details, I have the arm length of 200, and then I have it slightly rotated down. So when we're on the login page, we're kind of looking at this view right here, and we're just looking down at the town here. I have a couple more of those. I have one for begin play as well. So this is the begin play one of it. Just kind of looking up here. Then it transitions to this one, and then I have one down here for transitioning to the main menu, which I'll show you kind of how that flow works. But you can see an example of this in Ultimate Menu System working. That is how the camera targets go. Now, I have found you want your begin play one to be as close to 000 on the map as possible. I haven't really found a better way to make it not snap really quickly in the beginning. If you know of a way, let me know. I'll be all ears to hear it. But the what I found so far is just making this first node as close to 000 as possible. Okay, so let's go back into our login panel. That's what this is doing here. It's just determining. This is a visual thing. This has nothing to do with anything. This is just really where you want your character's camera. This is where you want your character's camera to be when we're loading up the menu. The next one is an on-clicked button for our sign-up button. This is just what all this does is when you click the sign-up button, it loads the sign-up widget. So it's going to do a load content from class from the menu manager, because I'm using Ultimate Menu System. It's going to load content from class, and it's just going to load the sign-up panel. Forgot password is, like I said, isn't doing anything yet. Eventually it will do something, but not right now. So the real meat and potatoes here is the login button here. So we have this on-clicked login button. So we first I made a little macro called check login inputs just because I like cleaner inputs. I will show you how that works. So all this is doing is pulling the text from our text boxes and checking if they are not empty. And then we have this little show error message. As a bonus, later on, I'll show you what this kind of error message thing is doing. It's actually pretty cool. At least I think it is. But it's just using the built-in request box system that Ultimate Menu System has. It's just a helper node for me. But all this is doing is checking to make sure that these values aren't null. And if they are null, it's just letting the user know, hey, you got to enter a username and password. So after we check the login inputs, we're going to use that get Cognito secret hash. That is the method in game instance that we implemented before. We're getting the username from our username text box. We're plugging that in. And then on the return, we're making a request here. So we'll come back to this in just a second here. But what we're doing is we're grabbing the Cognito identity provider client because we need that. We need that to call this next function, initiate auth. Now, you'll notice that this isn't an on-clicked. These latent nodes that you see here, basically anything with a little time symbol on it, these cannot be placed in functions. So if you're trying to make like an on-clicked or then a login function and you're not getting this node, that's why. You can't have latent nodes in a function. They have to be in an event graph or an event or something like that. So just keep that in mind of there is a reason why it's here, and I didn't put this in some kind of login function. All right. Off of initiate auth, we'll back up a little bit here now. Off of initiate auth, we're gonna pull off of this, and you're just gonna type make initiation auth request. The type you're going to want to change. You have a couple options here, but the type is going to be user password auth. As you might guess, that type of auth is you typing in a username and a password, which is what you're probably going to want for a login. There are other types of auth. By the way, make sure you do user password auth, not admin user. Admin user not only will not work if you followed my video, but it is also specifically for logging in an admin with elevated credentials in the Cognito. You don't want that. You want user. We just want the user to log in. Okay? Next, let me zoom in here so you can make sure you can see this, and I'll make sure you can read this. You're going to pull off of this auth parameters right here, and you're going to make map. So again, pull off, make map right there. And we're going to have a few keys and values. So key 0 is going to be secret underscore hash, just as it's written like that. Sorry if it's a little hard to read over there, but it's all caps, secret underscore hash. The value is going to be the secret hash that you get from this secret hash generator function that we looked at earlier. Then we're going to have a key 1, so the next key here. That's going to be all caps username, and that's going to be the username from your text box. And then key 2, password, the password input from your text box into value 2. Then the only other thing you have to mess with on this initiate auth request is plugging in your client ID into your client ID. Okay. Did I really unplug that? Wow, that would have been embarrassing if I tested that for a minute and I broke my own authentication flow. Anywho, we're going to plug that in. Make sure you plug it in. So we're going to initiate auth. Same thing as before. We're going to check if it's completed, and we're going to see if it was successful or not. If it was, we'll do something in a minute, and I'll show you. If it wasn't, we're going to show an error message of why it was not successful. So this is your login. This will basically show, like, if it wasn't successful, this will show something like wrong password, wrong username. Yeah, it will show you why it wasn't successful. However, if it was successful, you'll have something in this initiate auth result. So we're going to break that, and we're going to, in my case, because there's different challenge types that I plan on integrating later. I haven't quite done them yet, but I'm going to set the session, the challenge parameters, and the authentication result. Again, just pulling off of each of these, promoting the variable. All right. And then I have a class graph called challenge type. There are a lot of challenge types. I have not done all these yet, but this is where you are going to set up multi-factor authentication. So if the user has multi-factor authentication configured, the login may return successful, but it will say, hey, I need a multi-factor authentication key. And we'll see a little bit how that works when we get to the sign up in a minute. But right now, bare basics, I'm just off of not set, meaning there's no additional verification set. Off of not set, we're calling that set authenticated method that's in the game instance, and just calling the main menu method. This is just telling it we authenticated on the front end, open the main menu. That's what I have here. All right. Let's head over to sign up now. Sign up works very similar. So if I come in a graph, same thing on the panel loaded. We're going to stick with the login screen. We're not actually changing our camera position. Our back to login button, which is our back button, is just loading content from class, loading the login panel. This is how you can switch between login and sign up here. And then our sign up request, little longer. little longer on this one. And actually, before we get into this sign up, I am going to show you two things here. All right, so let's go back into game instance. Let me show you two things that I changed. So we have these mysterious functions called show error box and show message request box. They are practically identical in nature. They are both just calling this create request box method. Okay. This create request box method is a method that you are already going to have. There's going to be a few more inputs that you're going to see that you don't have. That's what we're going to go in to now. So if I double click this, you will already have, like I said, if you're using Ultimate Menu System, you will already have a create request box method. We just need to add a few things here. So I've added a hint text variable. Let me just pull over here. I've added a hint text, a show input box, a seconds to hide was already there. I believe I also added button sizes, but that won't be pertinent to you. That's more of a styling thing for me. So you want to add those over here to this method here. Then we're going to come to the right, and this is actually where we're using those methods. These variables right here are pulled from the inputs right here. So if I open this up and go to the designer, I have a couple extra things here that I added. So again, this is the WB. I have it's called WBP, but I think it's just called WB underscore request box. Again, you will have this if you have Ultimate Menu System. But what I've gone ahead and added is a few additional methods. I've added a hint text right here. I've added an editable text user input, which actually I probably want to take a peek at and potentially fix a little bit. But I've added that here. This is so that you can also add. You can make it expands the request box a little bit further to also be able to add text input, which will become very important for the sign up portion of it. All I did, like I said, in the vertical box, I just added a editable text input, just kind of stylized, sized it how I wanted to, added some background fluff to it, that sort of thing. Just kind of styled the menu how I liked it. But this is the important part. It's this hint text right here. And then in the graph, let me see if I can actually find it. Here we go. So copying just everything else that was like this. So I just like how label was done, I just copied that, set the hint text based on what the hint text was. And I also added this right here. So that show input box, that Boolean that we set earlier, that gets passed in here, the show input box. We're just checking if it's true or false. And if it's true, we're setting it to visible. If it's false, it's set to hidden. So it's just setting the visibility of that hint box to whether it's going to be visible or not. That's the only edits you need to make to this to actually make what the sign up does work. Okay. And then again, once you get that all edited up, just make sure that in your create request box function back in your game instance, or well, it's in menu master. We'll touch on menu master in a minute here after we get to the widgets. It will be, you'll just add those variables here so you have the inputs there. And then I just have, like I said, two helper functions just show basic error messages and basic messages. That way I don't have to, it keeps the style consistent. That way I don't have to drag in all this code every single time I want to show a message or an error message. I can just do a single node on it. Okay. Let's go back to the sign up panel and I'll show you kind of a little bit how these functions work a little bit better. So we're gonna go to sign up. Sign up is very, very similar, if not even a little bit easier to do. So same kind of thing. We're coming in here and we have this check sign up inputs. The sign up inputs are the same as the login. We're first checking that none of them are null. Here's that little helper function that I just showed you. So you can see how much easier that is than putting all the code in that I showed you before. You just have this nice little helper function now. To call that. You can also call a request box here. It's up to you what you want to do. But I have it. You have to fill out all the fields. Then we are doing a very, very primitive check of do the passwords match. I'm just checking if they match, mostly because Cognito does a lot of the authentication for you. Technically, you don't have to really do any of this checking because Cognito will do a lot of the verification for you. I'm just trying to kind of guard the back end a little bit, try to help it out a little bit here. But Cognito will yell at the user as well if you forget to do this or don't want to do this. So that's what the check sign-up inputs are for on the front end. Same thing as before. We're generating a secret hash because that's how we talk to our backend. The node is even easier though. So again, we're pulling off of Cognito Identity Provider Client, that variable that we set in game instance again. And just if you need a refresher of what this is, remember this is what we set here. So it's this variable right here, the main brain, if you will, of our operation. We're gonna call a sign up request. Same thing. This is a latent node, so you cannot put this into a function. We're pulling off of this and we're doing the client ID from the client ID, the secret hash to return from the secret hash of our function, the username from our text box, the password from our text box, and then this is how you would add additional fields because by default you just have username and password for these fields. You'll notice on my sign screen I also have email that I would like to add. So if you want to add email, you would pull off of user attributes, make an array, and then in attribute you would pull off of the 0 pin, type make attribute type. The name of the attribute type is going to be email, and the value is going to be your email field. This is also how you would make more fields if you wanted to. So if you had a phone number, a nickname, if you had more information you wanted to pull from the user, you would just keep adding pins to this make array function here and making more attribute types, plugging in the values as you went. I stopped at email just because I didn't want to make my sign up form too long, and that's really all that is needed for the login, in my opinion. But as you can see, I'm not using any of this other stuff at this point in time. It's just these guys right here. We call our sign up request. If it fails, you show the error message. So reasons it would fail is if we can't talk to the backend, we forgot to give it a secret hash, you typed, like you sent a bad value to it, like you set the username blank or you set the password blank. That stuff like that, why it would fail. If it does, however, if you followed again my video on how Cognito setup is, the sign up does succeed, but what it will return as is it will be in a state of verifying your email, which is what this next part is dealing with right here. So we're gonna come over to our sign up, and this next part right here is what this is dealing with. We're creating a request box. We are showing the input box. We're making the hint text the sign up code and the label enter code sent to your email. So this is how I'm creating the request box to prompt the user, hey, I need a code. Okay. And we're going to bind an event to on clicked. because I have seconds to hide 0 here because you don't want to give the user a time limit. Um, Cognito gives a pretty long time limit, so this doesn't really make sense for you to give a time limit here. So, after we've on-clicked it, we need to once again generate a secret hash and get the user input code from the username text box. And somewhere, here we go. So you will already have this. The request, the request. Oh, you might not actually have this. Let me show you that in a minute. On request box clicked, you'll have on clicked. I just called it this. You'll probably only have button. So if I come back into this create request box, it's going to be, here we go. It's this node right here, on button clicked. You need to add in your really it's not gonna do that. Okay, you need to come over here, scroll down to the left, come down to your event dispatchers. You need to add another input of type text, and then pull off your editable text box. That's this guy right here in the middle, and plug that into there. And that will allow you to get not only the button on these types of events, but also the input box value, which is what we need here. So once we grab that sign up code, we're now going to be calling a confirm sign up action. And that is going to take, again, our staples, client ID, secret hash, username, and this time a confirmation code. So this confirmation code is whatever the user typed in to this box that they were emailed, texted, whatever. They would put it in here, and they would use that to confirm their sign up. If this fails, we're going to show them an error message again, and I actually should probably add a little bit more error prone, but yeah, now that I'm thinking about this, you actually should be checking if this does fail and maybe pull the box up again. This is my 1.0 as well, so there's still going to be a few bugs. But if it does succeed, we're going to remove all of our request box, and we're going to load I believe we just go to, oh no, we load the login panel. So we load content from a class. We're just switching back over to login because it makes some semblance of sense that once the user signs up, they probably want to log in to play. And then we're going to switch to the login panel, and then we're going to show them a message of sign up successful, please log in. All right. So that is, believe it or not, that's sign up and login. It's more complicated than it looks. It's really just these two nodes right here for them. The reason it looks more complicated is it is entirely dependent on your user interface, which is kind of where the challenge comes in a little bit. A lot of this extra stuff that you see here is your user interface interacting with it and how you're showing boxes based on what events are coming in and out. So I would be remiss if I did not give you a demo of this all working. So let's go ahead and give you a demo. And I did promise, actually, I think I showed it before, but I'll show it again just in case. Like I said, I do have the sign out button as well, which is just called a global sign out and forces you to the login page. I might have to do that if this logs me in, because I've been working on my project quite a bit, so this actually might just log me straight in. We'll find out. Let's F11 this to full screen this. Sorry. I need to play it in standalone so it doesn't error out on me. There we go. That's a little happier. So again, our begin play screen, we click here, and as you can see, I'm currently not authenticated because my my login probably expired. It's actually been a while since I've done this login here. And it takes us to our login menu rather than the backend menu. And again, if I click sign up, it will bring me to the sign up page. I click back, it takes me to my login page. All right, and these animations are from Ultimate Menu System. That's kind of the animation type. That's how you kind of see go whoop, like pop in like that. You have your fields here. So I'm gonna log in because I already have an account. I actually have signups disabled on mine. Yeah, there we go. I'm gonna log in here. So type in my username and password. Log in, and there we go. Also, a little sneak peek of my character creator and login screen. I will be showing that off probably a little bit later. That one's kind of how to get everything into your database from um, my previous video where I showed you UCS and promised you all that I'd show you what the code is for getting that in. But that is login and sign up, and just to show you what it does. So for me, if I hit escape here, I have back, log out, quick to desktop. So if I actually just click log out here, it will global sign me out. Don't be like me. You should probably clear the fields out after they log in. I didn't, as you can see here. But signing out is working as well. It clears the logout session, takes me back to the login screen, forces me to log in again, and I can just click log in because apparently I was lazy and I got tired of typing at one point while I was testing this. So, okay, I know that was a bit of a long one. I do apologize with how long this one was. It would have been a lot longer if I showed all the widgets, which is why I wanted to kind of balance between this being an informative video showing how all this front end stuff works and walking you through it, but not showing you necessarily every step. If there is something unclear or you're not quite sure how something works, please, please, please feel free to comment down below or message me on Discord. More than happy to explain or add something to this that I maybe went too fast on, maybe didn't explain as well as I could. Please let me know if anything like that happened. Best of luck on all of your projects. Hopefully, after this, you should have an authentication system working in your project. Thanks, everyone, so much for watching. We do have a Patreon down below. Every little bit helps if you do want to say thanks. It is never required and it's never expected. Have a great rest of your day or night, whatever time it is for you when you're watching this video, and I'll see you all in the next one.